Hello. When I made my first videos last year for YouTube, I made videos about the art of learning languages. I made videos about how to make a word list, about translations, and also about something I called copying text. Later on, I went on to make videos about single languages where I spoke in those languages. Well, you have seen the result. Now I'm going back to the How to Learn Languages series, and I'll be elaborating on the concept of copying text. I'm not the only one who has used this idea. I know that Professor Argelius has invented a technique called scriptorium, where he writes down text by reading it aloud, and you'll have to look at his video to see how he does it. I'm going to do something in this video where I take up how you copy text at different levels of knowledge. Let's start out with the very first one. It's a language which I'm not really studying for the moment, but it's Irish Gaelic. And I wanted to learn that language after I found a couple of books in London about it. The problem is that then I got engaged in Bahasa Indonesia and other projects. So right now I'm not really studying Irish, but I made some exercises. I still keep the door open, and someday I will go back to learn that. But the problem is Irish is very different from anything I have seen before. The word order is different, most words are different. There are some English loan words, but they are not really recognizable. So there I had to make the full exercise with everything in it. You can see here on the picture a text I have taken from the internet, and it's a text which I'm made as a bilingual, you could say interspersed bilingual. I made this with Google Translate, and you could take some text, you copy it into a Word saying copy as text, and then you just color one of the language. So I have made here, first I have copied a sentence and have the first 4 lines, and then I have made a translation. And if you compare that translation with one, of course, in Danish on the paper, then you could say, why make a translation if you already got it on the paper? The point is, even especially Google Translate is not perfect. There will be words you would want to change. There will be words you could comment on. There will be words where another word might be more relevant. And in this case, there's even a language difference, because I made a translation with Google into English, but my own translation into Danish. That translation is a hyperliteral translation. I take every word and look at it. If the words add up to something else because it's an idiomatic expression, then I may note down what the meaning of that expression is, but the point is, idiomatic expressions are not worth learning unless you also know the ingredients. So even in that case, a word-for-word translation is the right thing to start out with, but you have to comment where there is some derived meaning, some idiomatic meaning. This time it's a text in Bahasa Indonesia. I've explained in my video about this language that originally I visited Malaysia, and I decided to learn Bahasa Malaysian, but I found that the number of sources in that language were far less than those in Indonesian. So I'm going to go for Indonesian first and then add Malaysian later. I have got several sources for this, but one of the most important for me has been this brochure about Singapore. What I've done here is in principle the same thing that I did with the first one you saw, where there was a translation. I have got here a text where I start out with Begitu juga halnya dengan Night Safari. And this language, even more than Irish, is very different from English and very different from Danish and other languages in Europe. Take the word yang in the first line, yang tak kenal sebagai. yang is translated to which within brackets. Why this? Because the yang is a strange grammatical word. It can be the conjunction of a sentence, subordinate phrase, but it can also be a word that simply links a noun and an adjective. And in this case, I indicate that this is a grammatical word by taking not the Danish word, but the English word and put it into brackets to show this is just something you have to recognize. It's strange. It's not something we use in our Western languages. Just learn it. There's a case further down. Para is a thing that makes other things plural. They don't have endings to do that in Bahasa. They don't have a lot of things. They use words to indicate whether something has happened in the future or in the past, and they can also use things to make things become plural. Otherwise, you wouldn't know whether it's plural or singular because the word itself doesn't say it. So this is a grammatical word. Para is not a word you would say it's like a number or something. It's an abstract pluralizer. There are words, of course, also which I've translated into English. Well, why shouldn't I? Which if a word translation pops up in English, then I use the English word. There's no need to stay inside one language when I make my translation. And that's the good thing. If you took the old grammar translation method, there you were forced to make a really good translation from the target language into your own language. That's bullshit. You should not make a good translation. You should make a precise translation. And if you have a good idea how to make that by using words from other languages or by making an error in your own language, then do it. This is where you start the exercise, with a translation below each copied section. And to the right you see a lot of words which I have looked up in the dictionary. They will of course go right into a word list. The point is, the translation should only be your help to keep the meaning of the original text together until you can skip that step. And skipping that step will occur at some point, and that will be the next step. Don't do the translation. I have illustrated this with a text from a magazine I bought in Vienna last year. This is Russian. That's a fun thing. This magazine is about Vienna and Austria. It is not about Russia. But it's a fine little thing, and the language, the level of the language is just perfect for me. So, as you can see, there is no translation anymore. There are words to the right, as in all the other steps where I have made something ready to be put into a word list. I look it up, maybe. It is not very important whether I get a completely correct translation and completely adequate translation in the first place. I will look it up maybe later when I make the word list. But this is the first step I do to remember a word which I meet in a text. That's put it in the column to the right. And apart from that, you can see I've just copied. And now you ask, how come that I could just fit the translated words, that I could just fit the unknown words into the column to the right? Well, you see, it may be a problem sometimes. And I have an illustration of that. This is from Esperanto. Esperanto is not a difficult language to learn, and that's the idea of Esperanto. And I simply ran out of unknown words. So I continued the text at the right, Oni productis la musica under commencia, and so on, down in this corner. So, if I had too many unknown words, then that would be a sign that the text was difficult. And then I would either make a translation version, I would write the text twice, or do something. And then that would fill up the space I needed to make the two things parallel again. So I found out that one column should in general fit one page of copied text. Let's assume you have a language which is totally new to you, but you can to some extent understand it because you know something that resembles it. This is short text copied from something called the NIN magazine in Serbian, which I bought in Belgrade a couple of years ago. And I have taken a little text about the dead patriarch Paul, I suppose. And in this case, I have not really planned to learn the language here now. So you will see I have taken notes of some words, but I didn't care to translate it because, there may be points in the translation which are not totally clear, but I can more or less guess what it is about. The point is here another one. It is simply to make me reflect on how this language is different from Russian. We continue. Norwegian is a language, of course, which I can understand as a Dane. You may hear even Norwegians cannot understand all the dialects. I can understand the things they say in television, including the humoristic things like Parlamentet and things like that, where people speak in strange voices. If I can understand that, then I must be fairly good at understanding Norwegian. I have learned somehow to write the thing they call bokmål, but that's very close to Danish. Bokmål is boring for a Dane. It looks too much like Danish. But they've got another way to use which only maybe 10 to 20% of the population use, and that's New Norwegian, Nynorsk. And when I read that stuff, I suddenly hear Norwegian in my head, and that's important. So, what did I do? I did as I would have done with a new and unknown language. I have made copies. And this is actually from a blog written by a girl called Ida from Blogspot. And I have marked out here. I've not made a list of unknown words because there are so few unknown words that I would just make a note of it in the text itself. But there's one here. I can see Bursdag. That's fødselsdag in Danish. Birthday in English. That was new for me. So I have just written a circle and the Danish translation after that. But apart from that, it's so few unknown words, it was not worth spending a column on that. So instead, I've done something else. I just copied, and each time I find something that I should notice, I made a line underneath. Sometimes it's a curvy line, sometimes a straight line. There's no real principle in that. But afterwards, I can take this sheet of paper and look it through. Oh, yes, I should remember. This is the next but last step. The last step, that was what I made this today at noon. I copied a text from Romanian about extrasolar planets. I didn't see one single word I didn't know. Fairly sober and many international words. With many international words, it's simple. So, the important thing is here that by making such a copy in a language which I know, I cannot speak perfectly Romanian, of course, but which I know fairly well, then I keep contact with a language which otherwise would be difficult to keep alive in a country like Denmark, where you hear very little Romanian. I don't have Romanian television. I could hear it on internet television, and have some links for that. But if I hear 1 hour of Romanian each month, that's the top. So instead of that, I read things on the internet. That's extensive reading. That's where I just let things pass through. That's an important thing. I listen also to some of those radio stations on the internet and television station. It just passes through that, but it's important to also to learn to let things pass through you quickly. But here I've copied a text, and then I am reminded of things which are specific for Romanian. I made a couple of notes in this text, for instance, about when they used articles and things like that, but in general, this is the end point of copying text. After this, it would be stupid to just copy text, then you would write your own. And after that, of course, the words will enter a word list. And word list, I've spoken about that in one video. I may take up a couple of aspects of that later, but that was all I had to say today. Goodbye.